Today I'm joined by a Singapore International. Armin joins me today. I welcome you to the show. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well, and it's a real pleasure to have you on. Of course, a Singapore International. Everything in your career is looking so good. Only 26 years of age, and you've travelled the entire world. What's it like to be a professional footballer?
It's tough, I would say. It's a lot tougher than a lot of people might think. From on the outside, it always looks like it's all glamour and stuff like that. But in fact, it's really tough. It comes with a lot of very very tough challenges. So yeah.
So, growing up in Singapore, what was that like? Was there funding for you to play as a kid? I mean, you ended up moving to Germany at the age of 5, but growing up, those 5 years that you spent in Singapore, what was that like?
To be honest, I don't remember too much about my time in Singapore. I was still very young. I was born in Singapore, and I went a little bit to preschool there and stuff. Um, but at the time, I didn't even play football, and football is at the time wasn't that big in Singapore. So it only really started for me when I moved to Germany at the age of 5, when I then joined the club. Yeah.
So you joined a club in Germany, as you just said, and later on
Mhm.
played for Borussia Dortmund's academy. But
Yeah.
do you remember the switch from Asia to Europe?
At that young age, not really, to be honest. I was still so young.
And what was it like growing up in Germany then? You've come from the other side of the world, come to a European country, evidently different to what it would have been like had you grown up in the other side of the world. But what was it like growing up in Germany?
I mean, growing up in Germany was really great. I think, especially when it comes to football, it is one of the best places to be in terms of development. Um, when I picked up football, that was around the time of the World Cup in Germany, for example. So that had a huge impact on me. And Germany in general places a very high emphasis on youth development in general. So at the time, it was a lot about street football, which nowadays it is not so much anymore. But at the time, I picked up football through a lot of friends who were just playing on the streets, and yeah, that's how I really got into football, and then also later joined the club, and yeah.
Absolutely no disrespect to Germany here, but in the most recent major tournaments, we've seen Germany kind of slip away from what they may have used to have been.
Yes.
Do you think that's
Yes.
because maybe they weren't playing street football, they weren't getting the technical side of the game?
Exactly. No, it's that has actually been a you're right with that. But first of all, that has actually been a major discussion topic here in Germany. Why Germany, with such a huge, I mean, Germany is such a huge country, and it has actually such a huge talent pool, but why haven't they been performing it, in the recent tournaments? And yeah, I think the Germans, they are very well structured and organized, and what they did in the recent years, since the World Cup win in 2014, was that they they tried to make it too much about organization, about structure, and they took the creativity from the players. So when I was young, it was still good if you could dribble players, if you could be creative. But at a later age, when I then reached, like, let's say, the under 17s, I was always a player who liked to do creative stuff. I came from the streets. I always liked to play on the streets, so I did step overs. I'd like to nutmeg people. I would get shouted at when I did that in Germany. So they really took that creativity from the players, and it's only now recently that they figured that that was actually a bad thing. Hence why Germany failed to produce good results at the recent tournaments, and they're trying to change that now slowly again, because they're figuring that Germany always, they had strong teams, but they're lacking that individual quality in the final third, that creativity. So yeah, that's the reason probably.
So do you have hope for the youth development in Germany that within the next 20 or 30 years there will start to be a really big influence of the technical side of the game?
Definitely. No, one thing the Germans are good at is when they make a mistake, they analyze it. They really thoroughly analyze it, and they improve. So the German FA has now implemented a whole new, different youth development system, So before it used to be all about, in youth football, it's about 11v11s and stuff like that, and it's not the best way to develop young players, because when you play like at a younger age, when you play 11v11s, how many touches do you get? How many decisions do you have to make in the game? It's not as many if you play like small-sided games, like on the streets. So to produce this kind of creative players, Germany is now has introduced this 2v2, 3v3 kind of games for the young players. So players are forced to actually dribble and be creative and then make something happen. Yeah.
At the age of 13, so you got signed to play for the Dortmund Academy, one of the biggest clubs in Germany,
Yeah.
Huge history. What was that
Yes.
like as a feeling? 13 years of age.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wouldn't say I wasn't really 100% signed to them or signed with them. I was like attached to them, and I was with them for like 1 or 2 years. They were monitoring my development. So this Dortmund opportunity actually came through. I was playing also a small-sided tournament in Germany, and after the tournament, actually, a scout from Borussia Dortmund came up to me and said he would like to invite me to a trial to Dortmund. And so I've been there for a few trials, and they liked what they saw. They liked my technical ability. But I was in a player pool with a few other players that they monitored, and we've had a few friendly games and training sessions and stuff like that. It was amazing because at the time Dortmund actually was the German champion. They were the champions at the time, and they had all these young and upcoming players like Mario Götze at the time was still at Dortmund. So at that time, it meant everything to me. It was amazing as a young kid to be attached to a club like Borussia Dortmund. Absolutely amazing feeling.
Before then, what were you doing? What were you playing? Just football in the streets? You got picked up off the streets?
I started with street football. So I lived in a town in Germany where I lived very close to a street football court. So at the time, there was no such thing as social media and not really video games and stuff like that. So whenever after school we would straight away we would eat and then go out and play all day long, until it would get dark. And that's how I really started and developed as a player. And then, of course, I think at age maybe 9 or 10, then I also joined a local club. And so basically for me, my life at the time was all football. It was club football, but even more street football.
Do you think that the children of today, you mentioned social media and video games, is it killing the generation of football? For you, I couldn't even imagine going outside and just playing football. It's, what's happened on Instagram, what's happened on TikTok. But living in your generation, although you're only 26 years of age, but living back then, when you had none of this social media, was that a good impact on your life?
100%. I think, yes, there is positives to social media. You can stay in touch with people and you can keep up with family and friends and stuff like that. But I believe that the impact on social media is the majority is bad. Because it keeps you hooked. It keeps you addicted to your phone. You keep scrolling and stuff like that. And younger kids nowadays, I see it. I have a younger brother. He's 12 years old. I see it with him. And I don't blame anyone for it because that is just the environment and society they grew up in. But before when I was younger, there was no such thing. So you would have to go out, you would have to meet people, you would have to socialize, you would have to do something. And then of course then a lot of people, they tend to get into sports, and especially football, of course, the world's game. And nowadays it's not like that anymore. Instead of after school going out to play with your friends, they play online. They play video games. They're on their phones, so it's completely different on their social development, as well as their football ability as well.
If you were growing up back then, or even in this new generation with the video games and the social media, when you were 5, 6, 7, whatever age it may have been, would you have seen your pathway now as successful? Like, would that have been a realistic aim to be a footballer?
Probably not, to be honest, because I think what really made me is the street football. I came from the streets. I can't even tell you how many hours I spent outside and just playing and practicing and working on my craft. So it, it's the impact that had on me and my career is massive. Without that, I would have never become the player I am now.
So then, you were in Dortmund, or you were attached to Dortmund for about a
Hmm.
year. You told me about a
Yes.
year.
Yes.
That feeling of signing, like we just spoke about, for the biggest club in Germany at the time,
Yes.
league champions.
Yeah.
What was the career path looking like then? Were you so anticipated to become a footballer? Was it a push by your parents, or did your parents sit back and say the choice is yours?
My parents don't come from a footballing background, so it was always just they were always just leaving it up to me. Whatever I want to do, whatever I want to get into, they would support me. Yeah, I mean, at, at the time, I already knew from a pretty young age. I already knew I wanted to become a footballer. So my parents are more from a kind of business educational kind of background, but they always supported me because they saw the passion and the love I had for the game.
How would you describe the love for the game? If you had to define it in a few words.
Undescribable. I can describe it. I can describe it. I mean, at the time, yeah. I mean, football is so much more to me than just a sport. It brings people together. I grew up in a neighborhood with a lot of other foreign nationals in Germany, a lot of Turkish, Italian nationals, and they just brought people together. So football is love, is passion, is so much more than just a sport. It really really brings people together, and also, like I said at the time, the World Cup 2006 in Germany showed that to me. When the whole world came to Germany, and yeah, it's just beautiful to see how a sport can bring so many people of different culture, races, everything can bring them together. It's beautiful.
We kind of had it with the Euros here in England in 2020, when
Mhm.
well, not all of them, a few of the teams,
Mhm.
came here and played football in Old
Yes.
Trafford and Wembley. But for the whole world to essentially be watching down on Germany, all these countries, all these fans flocking to Germany, what was it like then to grow up in that environment, hectic environment, constantly on the go?
Yeah, it was as a young kid, it was maybe too hectic. You see a lot of, you couldn't really grasp it as a young kid. Um, but yeah, I mean that's how I learned. How important it is to mix with other people and stuff like that, and there's different cultures and yeah. I mean overall, it was an amazing experience back then. Yeah.
So you were attached to Dortmund then for about a year. What
Mhm.
happened after that? So if you weren't actually playing for them, how did they kind of, part ways with you?
Yeah, I mean they were monitoring me. They were monitoring me in my development. So where they would come regularly for, I mean, they would invite me regularly for training sessions and stuff like that. And then they would also later on, yeah, monitor my performances at my club. So I mean that's what they told me. So yeah, after a year or so, I mean, they then signed a player, one or two players to their team from that player pool that I was in, who then really signed with them. And but they told me and my family that I was still being monitored and stuff like that. You see, at the time, Dortmund is one of the best academies in Germany. So at the time, they were German champions. So literally everyone wanted to play for them. So it was so competitive. And I tell you, so many players from that time that I played with and against. They are now in the Bundesliga. They are playing at the highest levels. So yeah, it was really a great experience to be with them. Even though I wasn't like signed to them really, because also it's not. So I mean, probably maybe if I would have lived somewhere near Dortmund at a time, it would have facilitated things a lot. But the problem is, I come from a town near Stuttgart in Germany, which is quite a while away. So to it takes a whole lot to take a boy out of his familiar environment and put him in the boarding school. Take him away from his family, his friends, and at such a young age. So that also, I think, played a part why I didn't join Dortmund at that young age.
From what you saw at Dortmund when you were there, on these trials, on these training sessions with the group, what was the difference like then compared to those facilities and obviously the street football
Hmm.
that you were so used to?
Yeah.
But then later down the line, when you look back on it, when you're a professional footballer in all sorts of countries, what was the
Hmm.
facilities like for Dortmund under 13s
Hmm.
to men's professional abroad?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, at the time, Dortmund had just built their new facilities, so they are still using those facilities. So everything was top notch. Everything was modern, top notch, very well structured and organized. And I mean, I've been lucky that later on in my professional career, I got to play for a few clubs that had a similar facilities. But that is really the highest level. So obviously not every club you play for in your career has that kind of facilities.
So then, at the ages of 14, 15, 16, all the way up to
Hmm.
17, what was that
Hmm.
like? Because you debuted in senior football in the sixth tier of
Yes.
Germany at the age of 17.
Mhm.
But in those
Yes.
gaps between, in the years between, what was accompanying your time?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was really just all about school and football. So, I mean, my parents, my family always placed a very high emphasis on education. So, I that was also one of my focuses to complete my A levels at the time, which I did at the age of 17. And then, other than that, it was just to become the best player that I can be and work hard every day and improve. So, I was juggling these two things. I mean, football and school. Basically, that was my life back then. I really did nothing else than just school and football.
So then, at the age of 17, what was it like to get called up to play for a senior team? What was it? So this club that you were playing for, when was the
Hmm.
contact initially made? Was it in that year of 17?
I think I joined a year before. If I was online, I joined for the under 19s. And also, we know with that opportunity that once I join, I can train with the first team and stuff. And it's a big difference between youth football and senior football. So I wanted to make that transition as early as possible because I knew it would have a good impact on my career. So yeah, at 17, I got called up to the first team, and yeah, it was tough, at 17. I mean, nowadays you get players that it's more common that at a young age you get called up to the first team and get some minutes. But at the time it wasn't as common, so I was quite special in a way. And yeah, you learn pretty fast that it's so much more serious, it's so much more physical, and it's cutthroat because it's about getting paychecks, getting bonuses, senior players trying to feed their families, stuff like that. So yeah, that's what I had to learn, and it was really good.
Were you physically ready at the age of 17 to be able to play against all these men?
I would say I was more physically ready than a lot of other younger kids. Because I was doing a lot of extra work in the gym. So when I was younger, I actually was always one of the smaller guys. So around 14 or 15, I really got into like gym and working out and stuff like that, and really, building my body, because I knew that I had to become stronger if I wanted to be a pro. So I think the physical part at the time was, in terms of mass and being solid in duels, wasn't a big issue. It was more other aspects of the game, such as maybe speed, and also the mental side of the game, which I struggled with at first.
Later down the line, we're going to jump ahead a little bit now. Later down the line, when you've just spoken about mentally, have you
Mhm.
seen, or maybe personally, has there ever been a cry for help where a player needs help mentally? Maybe someone's passed away in family, or just
Mhm.
overall they have a bad time mentally. But is there support for you pros? Because often now there's a lot of talks coming out that the pros don't
Mhm.
get the mental side of the game
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they're so focused on impressing thousands of people. But for yourself,
Mhm.
has there ever been an opportunity that you've seen that the pro doesn't get the help that they need?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think that's an area that still, there's a lot of room for improvement. A lot of pros struggle. Almost all of them, they struggle with the pressure from the fans, but also the pressure they put on themselves. And yeah, it's really not easy. And I mean, at the top of the top, there are sports psychologists you can work with and talk to. But if you go below that level, they don't place a very high emphasis on that. So that's why it's so important to just surround yourself with good people, have a good support system, and when it comes to, I mean, family, friends, and or privately. I mean, I encourage everyone to privately work with a sports psychologist, because yeah, it can get very dark and tough sometimes. So it's always good to have someone to talk to.
Do you remember that debut when you were, this guy playing, usually playing against people your own age, presumably, to
Hmm.
now playing
Hmm.
against these men of all ages, trying to get bonuses, trying to get their
Yeah,
salaries, like you said. What
yeah,
was that
yeah.
debut game like? Do you remember it?
I do, I do. I actually got subbed in the 60th minute or something, and I was so nervous. But the coach kind of trying to help me and took that nervousness from me. He said, "You will come in and you will change the game." Unfortunately, we still lost that game. But still, for me at the time, it was an amazing experience, and yeah, I'll never forget that.
You've gone from playing with people your age to now moving up the ranks, now taking it extremely seriously. You understand that there is a different side to the game, more tactics, more awareness of everything. But was there ever a time in the changing rooms where you'd see something different to what you weren't used to, whether it be obviously, men's language and, language that
Mhm,
wouldn't really
mhm,
be quite appropriate for someone your age? But
mhm.
what was that like to take such a transition behind the scenes of a football team?
Yeah, it's different, you know. It's different. You still do joke around with teammates and stuff in senior football, but at the end of the day, for a lot of people, it's a job. You know, they come there to like I said, to feed their families, to get their paycheck. So youth football is all about fun and having and enjoying and having a good laugh. Senior football is all about results. So and especially when the team is in need of a good result, the team is maybe fighting relegation, stuff like that, you can really feel the pressure, which in youth football you don't really have that, because youth football is all about development, and like I said, developing, having fun, um, preparing for senior football. And senior football is just about results. It's cutthroat, and you feel that kind of energy in the dressing room.
When you weren't motivated for games, maybe as now what I'd call an adult, or maybe back then when you were playing with the youth teams, when you weren't motivated to play a game, which would be hard to believe, but sometimes, as we spoke about, mental health can get in the way, or just in general you don't feel up to it, lack of sleep, lack of food. How do you get motivated for a game? Is it the coach? Is it a pre-match warm up? Is it things that you do every game to keep you motivated?
Mhm, mhm. Um, there's different methods. So first of all, I don't always rely on motivation to get things done. I rely on my discipline. If every time I had to be motivated to get something done, it would be tough. But of course, before games and stuff, you try to get yourself in the zone, and you can do that by yeah. I think music helps a lot with people, helps people a lot, or yeah, getting yourself in the zone. I don't know what other people do. They turn to religion and stuff like that. That helps them, to get in the zone and get ready for the game. So everyone is different.
Did you ever have any pre-match superstitions? Some players might put on their left boot before the right boot, or a goalie's left glove before the right glove.
Superstitions in that sense, not really superstitions. I would call it more routines that I need to do and get right, in order to feel that I'm ready to perform, such as eating well the day before already, eating well the day before, getting the right amount of sleep, preparing mentally, visualizing, and then on game day, yeah, same thing. Getting my stretches before the game, and then also, of course, high quality nutrition. Yeah.
So then, the international debut for Singapore came
Hmm.
at around this age, I believe.
Yeah.
How? Tell me how this happened. Tell me how a
Yeah.
player playing on the street, playing for Dortmund, sixth tier of Germany,
Yes.
to now
Yes.
representing his country.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, that's actually a crazy story. So you see, I was a young boy, 17, 18, playing senior football in Germany, in the lower leagues. But I wanted to play somewhere higher up and top level, and yeah, in Germany, it's similar to the UK and England. It's very, very tough. There's so much competition, so many good players. So it's very tough to get seen. But what I always had is that Singaporean heritage. So I was born in Singapore. My mom is from Singapore. So in the back of my mind, I always had that, idea that, maybe one day I could try Singapore, because Singapore is obviously so much smaller, and so it would be much easier for me to stand out there. So one day I just spoke to my family, and said, I would actually be interested to represent Singapore, and surely they would be interested to have me, a boy with Singaporean heritage, on their team. So we actually had a distant relative in Singapore who used to be a footballer there as well, and I contacted him and asked him how can we make this happen, and he just asked me basically to send a few videos of mine, of myself playing, and then we would see. So that's what I did. I recorded a few of my games, sent it over, and then yeah, they actually invited me over. They said, come over. So it was actually just the winter break here in Germany. So it was perfectly. I played the last game before the winter break, and then I flew over to Singapore. And there was nothing really planned. It was just planned that I play a few friendly games, and then I returned back to Germany. But actually, I didn't end up returning back to Germany. I stayed there. I played a few friendly games, and then everything went very, very fast. It was people scouted me, and then straight away the national team was interested, and then also a professional club in the Singapore Premier League wanted to sign me. So I actually ended up staying in Singapore for much longer than initially expected.
What's it like to play in Singapore? What's the football like over there? It must be very different to Europe standards, right?
Yes, it is. It is definitely different. It is definitely a culture shock. Yeah, I mean, first of all, the biggest difference is just the climate. At the time, like I said, I went to Singapore, and then I had just played in Germany in winter, so it's very cold, maybe even minus. And then you go there, and it's 35 plus Celsius, and an incredible humidity. So completely different climate, and that obviously also impacts the football a lot. So it's so hot that, first of all games are mostly played at night, and it's still very hot, and the breathing is different, and it was at the beginning, it was very, very hard to adapt. It took me a few weeks and even months, and yeah, I mean, in terms of the playing style, I mean, Germany is a country that is very tactical and technical. Singapore was different in the sense, I mean, Germany is also very physical, and Singaporean players are in general physically smaller, but they're quick. And they're maybe it's not so much about tactics, but more about individual skill and stuff like that. So it was very, very interesting. It was a completely different style of football.
I know for myself personally, when I go abroad, maybe to Africa or elsewhere in Europe, there is a bit of a, this is different to what I'm used to, especially coming from rainy old England, now coming to a humid temperature, a lot different to what you're expecting. And even, when you're running and you wipe the sweat off your head, it drips off, in these humid environments,
Yes.
whereas in England, it sticks and it's very, very uncomfortable. However, when you're growing up, now when you've grown up and you're in Singapore, and it's so different to the comparison in Germany, the weather, the standards, how did you adapt? Was it a case of, you keep training and pour water on your head? Is that how you adapt?
Yeah, I mean, you adapt basically by just by doing it over and over again, day in, day out, for weeks, and eventually your body will adapt. I mean, you have to pay attention to a few things. I mean, so if you play in that weather, you sweat a lot. In the first 5 minutes, you're completely drenched in sweat, which in Germany, sometimes even after 90 minutes, even in summer, it's not really like that. But over there, the first 5 minutes, everything is wet, you're drenched. So there's a few over there. You just have to pay more attention to hydration, for example. And those kind of things. Even before the games, they place a much higher emphasis on hydration and stuff like that, getting your electrolytes in because you sweat so much. Yeah.
So then, this international debut that you played, how many fans was it in front of? Big stadium, big atmosphere. What country was it against?
So my first international debut was actually a very, very special one. So it was in Africa, in Mauritius. So just a few months after I had arrived in Singapore, we got invited, the Singapore national under 21, to play against Mauritius, which is actually part of the African continent. So we flew over there, and it was on their national day that we played against them. It was a sort of a friendly game or of a tournament to celebrate their national day. So it was crazy. So the whole country was basically there, was in the stadium. I don't know how many fitted in that small stadium, 10, 15, 20,000. The president was there. So it was an amazing atmosphere. And yeah, also, I mean, knowing that, my family was watching back from Germany on a live stream, and it was so special. When I walked out that tunnel, I knew my family was watching. I knew my friends were watching, and when I sang the national anthem, I had goosebumps. Really, it's tough. You have to control your emotions because you're about to play 90 minutes of football. But yeah, I was a little bit emotional because it was so special.
Just quickly, what's the biggest amount of people that you've played in front of, in the stadium?
Probably. So you see, in Malaysia, actually, I played in Malaysia later on, and over there you get quite big crowds sometimes. Problem is, I was there during the COVID period, so there wasn't spectators allowed at all at some point. But I'd say like maybe 20, 25,000, something like that. Just a fully packed stadium in Malaysia. That was the highest attendance. I was unlucky because actually our home stadium at the time for the club I was playing um, was like 80,000, and then unfortunately we couldn't we couldn't I couldn't experience that because during COVID there were no spectators allowed in the stadiums.
For me, when I'm going to watch the football, my day would start from waking up, until getting to the football. The whole day is spent around traveling, eating, everything's preparing for this game. You're at the ground. There might be some people in hospitality, that are all towards football. Everything in that day is towards, people like you about to kick a football for 90 minutes. If you think about it, because people have done that, coming to watch you, what do you think about people revolving their whole day around you and your team?
Yeah, I mean it's crazy if you think about it. I mean, especially like I said, if you play, I've played for obviously my country, Singapore, but also some big clubs in some countries. For example, Malaysia, where it really means a lot to the people. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that um, it's so much responsibility and also pressure, of course, because you can literally make their day or break their day in a way. So um, yeah, as a footballer, that is the pressure you have to live with. We can give people so much joy through what we do. So that is a huge responsibility. That's why every time I step on the field, I try to give my best because I know that to some people it really means the world. They work all week long, or to just to be able to afford that ticket on the weekend to support their team. So yeah, it's very important for all players to always give their best.
When was the second game? When did you start to get into the Singapore team a bit more often? Was it straight after that game in Mauritius?
Yeah, it was straight after. I mean, we that year we played quite a lot of international games. It was a year of a lot of international tournaments as well. So there were a lot of games after that I got to feature in, and one of the next ones was that I really remember was we flew to Australia to play the Australian under 23s. That was a great experience. So yeah, in that year I got to travel a lot. Coming from Germany, having never played internationally, and then suddenly going to Singapore and featuring in so many international games at once. It was it was a lot at the time for me.
Did you ever play against any European nations?
It was planned at the time. I still remember actually that they had planned to do a training camp in Germany. That would have been very, very special for me, as a Singaporean to travel to Germany. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, it never happened. Yeah, it never happened, unfortunately. But there were plans. So yeah.
So the international debut was now an arrow to opportunities, a pathway to opportunities, whatever it may have, want to call it. You got offered a
Mhm.
professional contract in the Singapore Premier League,
Yes.
the
Yes.
biggest league in Singapore. Tell me about that.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I came there, I played a few games, and immediately scouts or coaches and stuff approached me, and they offered me a contract. And to be honest, at the time, coming up as a young player in Germany, I wasn't making a lot of money at the club I played. I was still a young boy, lower leagues. It's not amazing. And then suddenly you get offered a pro contract in Singapore, which was at the time, it was really a lot of money especially for a young boy, just 18, 19 years old, around that age. It was a lot. So, yeah, suddenly, in Germany, we would train in the evenings mostly, with my team. And suddenly, training is early in the mornings, sometimes even 7, 8 a.m. because to avoid the heat, when the sun rises. Yeah, and then, like I said, a really good contract, that allowed me to really just, yeah, everything else was taken care of basically, in such kind of professional environment, they took care of everything. We had the best coaches, we had everything. They provided us with food after trainings and stuff like that. So really, all you had to do was just to play football. That's all. That's all you had to focus on.
You've mentioned that everything was done for you, and you've woken up very early in the morning. Probably not preferable. Maybe you like a lion, maybe you
Yeah.
don't. But for some people that like the lions and like to wake up at 11 or 12, that's obviously quite unrealistic if you're a professional footballer.
Mhm.
But to wake up at 5 or 6 to play football is extremely early. So, what was the
Yes,
day
it is.
shifted like? Was there a different sort of day so you'd go to bed earlier than what was usual?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, if you train early in the mornings. I mean, it always depends. You see that there again, the climate is such a huge factor over there. So, um, the thing is, over there, you try to avoid the heat, and when the sun is up and stuff like that. So it's either you go early in the morning or very late at night. But then also there's a problem in that kind of region. There's the monsoon rain. So that is a very heavy rain that usually takes place in the afternoon. So during when it was not monsoon season, we would train mostly in the late afternoon, evening, sometimes night. But during the monsoon season, when there's this heavy rain kicking in, you have to train early in the morning to avoid it, because yeah, a lot of times, it's so heavy, the rain, that it will flood all the pitches and stuff like that. So it's almost makes it impossible to train. So yeah, you have to adapt to it. You have to wake early. Sometimes it messes with your sleep rhythm, but yeah, that's just a sacrifice you have to make.
This is the start of what is defining you at this current stage. But this
Mhm.
debut for the Singapore Premier League team, like you
Mhm.
just mentioned, from Germany to now the best division in a country is just absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. What was the debut like? Again, you must have been quite nervous, but obviously maybe not as nervous as you were for Singapore.
Yeah, yeah. No, again, I think it was so special. Of course, I think like you said, there's still a difference between club football and international football. I mean, um, when you play for a club, yes, you also play obviously for that town and a few people. But when you play for a nation, so Singapore is like, I don't know, 5 million people living there. So you play for a whole nation and those millions of people. So that is again a whole different level of pressure, because you're representing a country internationally. Um, but yeah, club football was I still remember it. Also my family is watching, and you also know you have to perform. Scouts are always watching, so the pressure is always on.
A year later, after you signed that contract, Switzerland came along, the second division in
Yeah,
Switzerland, and you stayed there for half
yeah,
a season. But
yeah.
again, where did this come along? You've gone from Singapore back to Europe to Switzerland.
Yes. So that is an interesting one. So I would have probably liked to stay in Singapore, and the club also offered me a contract extension. They really wanted to keep me there. The problem in Singapore is Singapore has this thing called national service. So national service is like, you have to basically do your military service for 2 years. There's a few other countries that have it, I think, such as Korea. But in Singapore, they're very strict with it. So in those 2 years, you basically can't really play football. It's very, very tough. So at the time, they actually forced me to make a decision, because Singapore also does not allow dual citizenship, actually. So I had a German passport at the time, and I also held a Singaporean passport. And at the time, the question was, do I want to keep continuing to play for Singapore? But then I had to give up my German passport, which is obviously also a very powerful one, also with, regarding my ambition to play in Europe. Or do I give up my Singapore citizenship? Do I give up the opportunity to represent Singapore internationally, but keep my German passport? I do not have to serve the military for 2 years, and I can still keep my dreams alive of playing in Europe. So at the time, we were really discussing a lot, and we had a few talks with the FA. The president of the Singaporean FA wanted to meet me. They really wanted to do everything to keep me there, but at the end of the day, I, together with my family, decided that for me at the time, it was the best decision to return to Germany, because I wanted to, because Singapore was just the beginning for me. I was 18. I just had made my professional debut, my international debut. I was dreaming of the top leagues in Europe. I was dreaming of making it back to Germany, to the Bundesliga. So, I decided to give up my Singaporean citizenship and actually return to Europe. And that's actually how that Switzerland opportunity came along. So I was contacting a few teams in Germany and around Germany, in the neighboring countries, Switzerland, Austria, and then actually this team in Switzerland, from the second league in Switzerland, offered me a contract, which I then took. So that's how the move to Switzerland happened.
What's their style of football like? You never really hear about Switzerland teams. I mean, I suppose Basel and maybe young boys as well. But apart from that, they're lacking quality. You'd understand, you'd probably be able to see that there's a big shift. You've got 2 Champions League clubs, teams that are good enough to play in Champions League, and now you go into teams that are, I don't know. Tell me what they're like.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the style of play, Singapore is actually Switzerland is actually not so different from Germany, because of, it's close. It's a little bit similar in the style of play, quite organized and stuff. What you have in Switzerland is it's a much smaller country, so the player pool is so much smaller. So that's what you see, in the bigger countries in Germany, in Europe, you have a lot more quality players. Maybe in Switzerland, there was a bit of a lack of that. But still, such a small country, I think they managed to qualify for the World Cup almost every time. So they're definitely doing something right, and it's not a bad level for sure.
Half a season. Why would you stay there for half a year? You decided to come to Europe, probably against your will. As you said, Singapore was probably the preferable option to continue the development of yourself.
Yeah.
Switzerland, half a season, then you're moving back into Asia.
Yeah, after I was in Switzerland, and to be honest, Switzerland is a beautiful country, and it was a great experience to play there. But it's different, when you come from Asia. So just to put things into perspective, I was in Singapore. I was living in an amazing apartment complex with a pool, with a gym. I had a great lifestyle in that sense. I could really just focus on football. I was at a club that provided me with everything I needed: top coaches, top facilities, as we spoke about. And then, and in Singapore, I was regarded as, I wouldn't say superstar or anything, but up and coming, youngster, and I was getting media attention and stuff like that. And then I went to Switzerland, and it was completely different. It was a shock, because over there, no one really cared who I was. No one knew who I was. And I had to fight to get a spot in the team. And the lifestyle was completely different. And it was more, down to earth again. And it was tough, as a young player. It's tough to deal with that. So after half a season, I was like, I need a change. I actually want to go back to Asia. I felt that belonging to Asia, I felt that in Asia I was more appreciated than in Europe. So I was like, okay, let me try to get back to Asia, which then happened with my move to Malaysia.
You were offered to go back to Malaysia, not just by your family, not just by yourself, but the Crown Prince of Malaysia.
Yes.
And we'll now go on to find out that you couldn't play due to registration, but you've played now for one of the biggest teams in Asia. So you've gone from Switzerland back home.
Yes. Yeah, that was amazing. That was such an unexpected opportunity. So My grandfather is actually is from Malaysia, so I have Malaysian heritage. And one day, I mean, I always knew that, but one day I found out that actually, that was actually during my time in Switzerland. I found out that I'm actually eligible to represent the Malaysian national team because of that. So there's this grandfather rule that says that, if one of your grandparents is born in the country, you are eligible to represent that country through according to FIFA rules. So I found that out. And yeah, I just contacted a few people in Malaysia, trying to get into Malaysia, trying to get a Malaysian passport, because Malaysia, in terms of football, is actually quite a powerhouse in Southeast Asia, much more than Singapore now. By the way, as we're recording this today, Malaysia actually drew South Korea in the Asian Cup 3-3. So I think that shows you that Malaysia is an up and coming nation. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so I contacted a few people, and there was straight away clubs interested. There was actually a club that straight away offered me a contract. Without any trial or anything, they offered me a direct contract. But there was this club called Johor Darul Takzim. The short form is JDT, and it's owned by the Crown Prince of Johor, who is a very, very powerful man in Malaysia and also in the world of football, I'd say. So I wanted to play for that club, but it was very unrealistic. So one day I just sent him an Instagram DM, not expecting any reply, because that man has like 5 million followers on Instagram. He hangs out with Ronaldo and Messi sometimes in his free time. So that guy is like top notch, really top notch. And I just sent him a DM, explaining my background and everything, and where I've played and my Malaysian heritage, and just asked if I could come for a trial. And I didn't expect anything. And he actually got back to me. So yeah, he replied that he would love to invite me to a trial. And then it went very, very fast. He passed on everything to his sporting director, and they immediately flew me in. Just like a few days later, they covered everything. They flew me in for a 4-week trial. They flew me in, covered the flight, put me in a 5-star hotel, covered all the food. So top notch, really. And then yeah, again, everything was taken care of. I was treated so well there, so I could really perform to the best of my abilities. And yeah, I performed in the trial. I scored in the trial game, and they decided to offer me a contract.
15 nations you've now gone on trial with, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's it like to go on trial? Because you're not actually with this club. You're now playing just to try and prove an opportunity, not for
Yeah.
yourself, but now for the crown prince of the country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's a lot of pressure. I still remember at the time, during the final, or before the final trial match. So they actually told me before the final trial match that okay, Armin, now after this game we're gonna make a decision. And all of them, they were watching, the important people of the club. And it's a lot of pressure to deal with. I still remember that before the game I was super nervous. Thankfully I had some senior players in the team to guide me, who had also played in Europe at the top level. So they helped me a bit, playing alongside them.
You've gone now from the best team in Asia, and you decided to, not be able to play because of registration issues, and obviously probably a bit of a heartbreaker for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happened? You've now joined the most historical Malaysian team.
Yeah. So after that, so the thing over there was that I to play there, I needed to become a local and get a Malaysian passport. And normally in the past, it would have not been a problem for the club to get me the Malaysian passport. But at the time, there was some political issues with the government and whatsoever. So they couldn't actually get it for me at the time. Even the crown prince with his power, he couldn't do it at the time for me. So yeah, and then all the foreign spots they were full, because such a club of such yeah, such a prestigious club with such a prestigious owner, they have the financial means to bring in top players to fill in their foreign spots. So at the time, actually, I played with some top guys who had just come from La Liga, who had just played against Messi and Ronaldo. some Brazilians who had played in the Bundesliga and stuff like that. So that was the level of foreigners they kind of brought, and there was no way that I could compete with them for the foreign spot. So I was looking for a team. I wanted to stay in Malaysia because I love the country, I love the people, and I was looking for a team where I could actually play as a foreigner. So there was actually there was this team, Selangor FC, where that had just signed a German coach and technical director. They just brought him in, and so I was thinking maybe that could be an opportunity. So he's actually also from Stuttgart in Germany, which was a coincidence. So I actually met him back in Germany during the Christmas period where I was back in Germany, and I met him there. We had a good conversation, and he was open to the idea to bring me in as a foreign player. So just a few weeks after that, I flew to Malaysia again, and I actually ended up signing for that club, which is actually, in terms of the history of Malaysian football, is a very, very historical and prestigious club in Malaysia.
Top facilities, I'm presuming, right? Everything was paid for you, like you said,
Yes.
travel, everything. So
Yes.
that ended, I think, after a few years, I believe. And then your contract ended and they went on trials into Europe. So these 15 trial nations that you've gone to are now starting to slowly uncover and unveil themselves. What sort of countries were you looking to play in?
Yeah, so at the time, then I was just thinking, I want something new. I wanted a new experience. I've been in Malaysia for a bit, and I was like, okay, I want to go back to Europe, but I don't want to go back to Germany and Switzerland. I've also tried before, so let me see what other countries there are. So I got in touch with a few people, with a few agents, with a few coaches, and that's how some of the other opportunities came. So I was in Austria, trialing with an Austrian Bundesliga team. The Scandinavian region is where I've been a lot now. Norway, Iceland, those kind of regions. So it's been very, very interesting. I've never been afraid to put myself in outside of my comfort zone. It's never easy to go to another country with another language, another style of football, and trial and put yourself under that pressure. But it has developed me a lot, and I've gained so many valuable experiences. So it has really shaped me as a player, but most importantly as a person.
I've spoken to a lot of people from Scandinavia, Finland, Sweden, these major countries now that are coming into the footballing world so often. We see with the likes of Haaland, coming from Norway and Odegaard and all these amazing players of such young ages and such mature personalities for such young ages.
Yes.
Your time in Iceland was cut short. You left after a few months. However, before that, you've had the opportunity to go on trial here and there, and then Iceland came calling.
Yeah. Iceland was an interesting one. So in that year, actually, I was basically flying throughout Europe. I think that was year 2022. I was just basically flying throughout Europe, looking at different options. I started off in Lithuania. I didn't really like it there. Then I went to Norway. Norway was not bad, but the style didn't really suit me. It was super direct. And then I was with a team in Iceland before. It was also more direct. But then I joined this. I got this offer to trial with a team in Iceland, which they really wanted me. They saw my videos and stuff, and they also, again, they paid for all my flights to Iceland, invited me over, and they actually had a very experienced coach who used to coach in Stoke City in the I think Championship or Premier League back then, and a very experienced guy. And he was playing a more sort of possession-based football. So I really fitted in well. And I ended up signing for that team in Iceland.
And what was that like? What's the divisions like? What's the fan bases like? What's the facilities like?
Okay, so Iceland is a bit of a weird one and a crazy one, because Iceland is such a small country, also in terms of population. Iceland, I think they have like 300,000 people, 300,000 inhabitants, and that's such a small number. I mean, major cities in Germany have much more than that. But what I found in Iceland is, with that small population that they have, with that small, with what they have, they work extremely well. So all of the clubs they have I mean, there's a very, very limited amount of clubs there. I don't know how many, 50 clubs in the whole country, maybe. I don't know. And they all have top-notch facilities. Obviously, a lot of indoor facilities and artificial grounds because of the weather conditions over there. But top-notch facilities, top-notch coaches. All the coaches, I think, over there have licenses to a very high level. Yeah, that's how such a small country like Iceland, that's how they actually qualify for the Euros. They actually, I think they beat England in the Euros 2016. They did, I think, and they drew with Argentina in 2018. So a country with 300,000 people, if they want to make it to that kind of stage, they must be doing a lot of things right. And what I found out there, yeah, is they do a lot of things right. They have very, very hungry players and amazing coaches and amazing facilities. So that is what makes Iceland very, very special.
A country with 300,000 people has essentially what you just said, has done an amazing job for what it has at its disposal. Only 300,000 people to pick from to play in a football team, essentially.
Exactly.
How is it? Just because of their culture? Is it their work ethic? Is it just the way that they've been brought up as a country?
Yeah. So Icelandic people are extremely tough. They're extremely tough, and they may not be the biggest nation when it comes to obviously population and talented footballers and creativity. But what all Icelandic people in general have, they have a huge fighting spirit. So they have that never give up attitude, never die attitude, and they that's what they emphasize on. In each and every training, I think that's probably the highest intensity I've ever played at. In terms of training intensities. They're always on the go. They're always working hard. They're always fighting and never giving up. And that's why such a small country. That's how they can compete. And also what they do is they don't give up on players. So they have such a small talent pool that they cannot afford to lose talent. So in Germany, for example, Germany has millions of footballers. So they can afford to lose a good player here. They can afford to lose a bad player there because there's another talent that will come in. A small country like Iceland has 300,000 people living there. So and of those 300,000, how many of those are actually playing football, and how many of those are young men playing football? Not so many. So with that very extremely small player pool that they have, they really maximize everything. They really try their best to get the maximum out of each and every player, and they do not lose a player in the sense where they do not give up on a player. If a player maybe is a little bit stagnant in his development, they will not give up on him. They will still continue to work with him, to develop him. So for such a small country, it's essential to do that, to survive.
Slowly but surely, we are running out of time. But essentially, you left because you basically didn't get on with the coach, and then you've come back to Germany in the 4th tier, and you said that you wanted to reunite with your family after being abroad for so long in so many different countries. So just quickly, then, the 4th tier of Germany, extremely, extremely high, four years away from Bundesliga football potentially. Yeah. What was that feeling like?
Yeah, it was, after such a long time, I've been in so many different countries. I've been living so far away from my family all the time. Especially then, of course, there was the COVID period where travels weren't allowed. So I didn't see my family for like 2-3 years, some of them. So it's been a very long time that I've been overseas, and I just wanted to return home again. I was wondering what it would be like now with all the experience that I've gained overseas and in international football to actually return to Germany, and so this team in the Munich region had actually offered, made an offer, and I happily took it, because also I wanted to experience what professional football in Germany is like again. So it was good again, again different style, Germany, more kind of organized football, and still one of the highest levels I've probably played, the 4th tier in Germany. It's quite underrated. It's very, very underrated. It's a very, very high level. Although there's so many young players in that league that you will see that will go on to play in the Bundesliga later on. So very, very competitive.
January 2023, the second tier of Australia decided to try
Yes,
and sign you. And you're smiling
yes,
because you know what happened next. There was delays in the
yes.
visa, the club terminated the move, and you said that they absolutely showed you zero respect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a crazy one. That is one of the crazy stories, that I experienced in the world of football. You know, normally you think that once you put pen to paper, everything is done, and the move is done and everything. Yeah, and you can just fly over and get started. But yeah, the thing with Australia at the time was this club offered me a deal, and it was a great deal. I was super excited to play in a new country, but also a new continent. Again, I mean Australia. I've been there before for with the national team of Singapore, but to play in the league there was very very yeah, interesting to me. So yeah, I signed the contract. Everything was done and dusted, and then the only thing was the visa. So Australia is a very remote country, and they're very strict with their immigration policy. So they do due diligent checks, on you as a person and stuff like that. So the visa and then the working permit and stuff like that, it takes some time sometimes. So contract was signed, and I was applying for the visa, but it took some time. So it took a few days, and then it started to take a few weeks, and I was waiting and waiting, but the contract had been signed, so I wasn't worried about any problems with the club. And then suddenly the club just informed me that they're really sorry, but they can't wait any longer, and they're looking into signing a new player, and I was shocked, because how can you, I mean, the contract was signed and everything, and then they're just telling me that because it's taking too long, the visa is taking too long, we have to look for another player. Yeah, I mean, that was a crazy experience, but yeah, I guess that's football sometimes, it's just crazy.
You ended up training with JDT
Yes, yes,
back in your home, should we say, where
yes.
the Crown Prince offered you to play some
Hmm.
football, training there, keeping fit.
Yes.
And yeah, so now you're back in Germany for a few more opportunities. And talk me through that. What's coming up in the next few years?
Yeah, so actually, yeah, like you said, after that Australia opportunity, after that fell through, I actually spoke to the Crown Prince again, who I'm very close with, and who is an amazing person. And yeah, he allowed me to train with his prestigious club once again, and again covered everything for me. I was staying in a five-star hotel, food and everything, accommodation provided. Um, but again, obviously, I couldn't sign there because of for the reasons, because of I can't play there as a local. So yeah, then I decided in the summer of 2023, I decided to yeah, return to Germany, because there was a team at the time that really wanted me. So I decided to sign there, knowing that it wouldn't be for very long. So I'm officially still signed with this team. It's a team in the sixth German tier in the Munich region. Um, but yeah, I think I'm currently looking into some new options. I'm discussing with agents and coaches. So yeah, let's see where football takes me. Where this journey is going to continue. So far, always something has come up. Most of the time, even some crazy option has come up. So yeah, let's see what the future holds. I'm definitely I'm excited. I'm always working hard and being in my best shape. And whenever a call comes, I'm ready.
Lastly, 26 years of age, where would you like to see yourself in the peak of your career? Premier League football, Championship? Have you had to compare it to an English tier?
Yeah, I mean, if I could make a wish, yeah, I'd love to play the Premier League at the highest of levels. But I think that's not the most realistic at this age. Yeah, I mean, for me, I just wanna be the best player I can be, play at the highest level that I can play at, and yeah, I'm just looking for experiences. I just want to develop as a player, but also, and even more importantly, as a person. So yeah, a few more overseas experiences would be nice. Some different countries, different cultures. I've played on 4 continents now, so Europe, Asia, so the Australian continent, Oceania, and then Africa also with the Singapore national team. So one continent that is still missing is actually the American continent. So I've also spoken to some people I know over there, and who knows, in the future I might be interested to experience that. Let's see what comes.
Inter Miami are holding you a contract ready for you to sign. It has been an absolutely great interview, Armin. Thank you very much for joining me. Singapore International, thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you.